seat. Get ready for a show where anything can happen and the energy will flow. Welcome to the fun house where the music's loud and the lights are bright. A one-of-a-kind experience that will keep you up all night. You might get just Paul, or maybe one of his friends. Jazzy the Jester, Max the Magnificent, Logan the Legend. They're all here to take you on a ride. So join Paul and friends and let the good times roll. In the world of the fun house, where anything goes, let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome back to Paul's Funhouse. This week we are going to dive into the ever-popular vampire lore, another 3-part series that should be a lot of fun. So without further delay, let's get right into it. A vampire is a mythical creature that subsists by feeding on the living's vital essence, generally in the form of blood. In European folklore, vampires are undead humanoid creatures that often visit loved ones and cause mischief or deaths in the neighborhoods that they inhabited while they were alive. They wore shrouds and were usually described as bloated and of ruddy or dark countenance, markedly different from today's gaunt, pale vampires from the early 19th century. Vampiric entities have been recorded in cultures around the world. The term vampire was popularized in Western Europe after reports of an 18th century mass hysteria of a pre-existing folk belief in Southeastern and Eastern Europe that in some cases resulted in corpses being staked and people being accused of vampirism. Local variants in Southeastern Europe were also known by different names, such as sharing in Albania, Vrikolakas in Greece, and strigoi in Romania, cognate to Italian strega, meaning witch. In modern times, the vampire is generally held to be a fictitious entity, although belief in similar vampiric creatures, such as the chupacabra, persists in some cultures. Early folk belief in vampires has sometimes been ascribed to the ignorance of the body's process of decomposition after death, and how people in pre-industrial societies tried to rationalize this, creating the figure of the vampire to explain the mysteries of death. Porphyria was linked with legends of vampirism in 1985, and received much media exposure, but has since been largely discredited. The charismatic and sophisticated vampire of modern fiction was born in 1819 with the publication of The Vampire by the English writer John Polidori. The story was highly successful and arguably the most influential vampire work of the early 19th century. Bram Stoker's 1897 novel, Dracula, is remembered as the quintessential vampire novel, and provided the basis of the modern vampire legend, even though it was published after fellow Irish author Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu's 1872 novel, Carmilla. The success of this book spawned a distinctive vampire genre, still popular in the 21st century, with books, films, television shows, and video games. The vampire has since become a dominant figure in the horror genre. The term vampire is the earliest recorded in English, Latin, and French, and they refer to vampirism in Russia, Poland, and North Macedonia. The English term was derived, possibly via French vampire, from the German vampire, in turn, derived in the early 18th century from the Serbian vampire. Tales of supernatural beings consuming the blood or flesh of the living have been found in nearly every culture around the world for many centuries. The term vampire did not exist in ancient times. Blood drinking and similar activities were attributed to demons or spirits who would eat flesh and drink blood. Even the devil was considered synonymous with the vampire. Almost every culture associates blood drinking with some kind of revenant or demon, or in some cases, a deity. In India, tales of Vedalas, ghoulish beings that inhabit corpses, have been compiled in the Baital Pasisi. A prominent story in the Katha Saritsagara tells of King Vikramaditya and his nightly quests to capture an elusive one. Pisaka, the returned spirits of evildoers or those who died insane, also bear vampiric attributes. The Persians were one of the first civilizations to have tales of blood-drinking demons, creatures attempting to drink blood from men, were depicted on excavated pottery shards. Ancient Babylonia and Assyria had tales of the mythical Lilitu, synonymous with and giving rise to Lilith and her daughters, the Lilu, from Hebrew demonology. Lilitu was considered a demon and was often depicted as subsisting on the blood of babies and estries. Female shape-shifting, blood-drinking demons were said to roam the night among the population, seeking victims. According to Sefer Hasidim, estries were creatures created in the twilight hours before God rested. An injured estrie could be healed by eating bread and salt given to her by her attacker. Greco-Roman mythology described the Empusae, the Lamia, the Mormo, and the Striges. Over time, the first two terms became general words to describe witches and demons, respectively. Empusa was the daughter of the goddess Hecate and was described as a demonic, bronze-footed creature. She feasted on blood by transforming into a young woman and seduced men as they slept before drinking their blood. The Lamia preyed on young children in their beds at night, sucking their blood, as did the Gallaudet, or Gello. Like the Lamia, the Striges feasted on children but also preyed on adults. They were described as having the bodies of crows or birds in general, and were later incorporated into Roman mythology as Strix, a kind of nocturnal bird that fed on human flesh and blood. In Turkic mythology, an ubir is a vampiric creature characterized by various regional depictions. According to legends, individuals heavily steeped in sin and practitioners of black magic transform into ubirs upon their death, taking on a bestial form within their graves. Ubirs possess the ability to shapeshift, assuming the forms of both humans and various animals. Furthermore, they can seize the soul of a living being and exert control over its body. Someone inhabited by a vampire constantly experiences hunger, becoming increasingly aggressive when unable to find sustenance, ultimately resorting to drinking human blood. Many myths surrounding vampires originated during the medieval period. The 12th century British historians and chroniclers Walter Map and William of Newburgh recorded accounts of revenants, though records and English legends of vampiric beings after this date are scant. The Old Norse Draugr is another medieval example of an undead creature with similarities to vampires. Vampiric beings were rarely written about in Jewish literature. However, the 16th century rabbi David ben Solomon, Ibn Abi Zimra, also known as Radbaz, wrote of an uncharitable old woman whose body was unguarded and unburied for 3 days after she died. She rose as a vampiric entity, killing hundreds of people. He linked this event to the lack of a shmira or guarding after death, as the corpse could become a vessel for evil spirits. In 1645, the Greek librarian of the Vatican, Leo Alatius, produced the first methodological description of the Balkan beliefs in vampires, known in Greek as Vrikolakas, in his work De Graecorum Hodie Quorundum Opinationibus, which translates to On Certain Modern Opinions Among the Greeks. Vampires, properly originating in folklore, were widely reported from Eastern Europe in the late 17th and 18th centuries. These tales formed the basis of the vampire legend that later entered Germany and England, where they were subsequently embellished and popularized. An early recording of the time came from the region of Istria in modern Croatia in 1672. Local reports described a panic among the villagers inspired by the belief that Jura Grando had become a vampire after dying in 1656, drinking blood from victims and sexually harassing his widow. The village leader ordered a stake to be driven through his heart. Later, his corpse was also beheaded. From 1679, Philippe Rohr devotes an essay to the dead who chew their shrouds in their graves, a subject resumed by Otto in 1732, and then by Michael Ranft in 1734. The subject was based on the observation that when digging up graves, it was discovered that some corpses had at some point either devoured the interior fabric of their coffin or their limbs. Ranft described in his treatise a tradition in some parts of Germany that to prevent the dead from masticating, they placed a mound of dirt under their chin in the coffin, placed a piece of money and a stone in the mouth, or tied a handkerchief tightly around the throat. In 1732, an anonymous writer writing as the Dr. Weimar discusses the non-putrefaction of these creatures from a theological point of view. In 1733, Johann Christoph Herrenberg wrote a general treatise on vampirism, and the Marquis d'Argens cites local cases. Theologians and clergymen also addressed the topic. Some theological disputes arose. The non-decay of vampires' bodies could recall the incorruption of the bodies of the saints of the Catholic and Orthodox churches. Indeed, vampires were traditionally considered highly problematic within Christianity, as their apparent immortal existence ran against the Christian belief that all true believers may look forward to an eternal existence with body and soul as they were resurrected, but only at the end of time when Jesus returns to judge the living and the dead. Those who are resurrected as immortal before this are thus in no way part of the divine plan of salvation. The imperfect state of the vampire body and how they, despite their immortal nature, still needed to feed off the blood of the living further reflected the problematic aspect of the vampires. Contrary to how the incorruptible saints foreshadowed the immortality promised all true Christians at the end of time, the immortality of the undead vampires was thus not a sign of salvation, but of perdition. The unholy dimension of vampirism may also be reflected in how, in parts of Russia, the very word heretic was synonymous with a vampire. Whoever denied God or his commandments became an erotic after his death, the improperly immortal figure that wandered the night in search of people to feed on. A paragraph on vampires was included in the second edition, 1749, of De Servorum Dei Beatification et Sanctorum Canonization, on the beatification of the servants of God, and on the canonization of the Blessed, written by Prospero Lambertini, Pope Benedict XIV. In his opinion, while the incorruption of the bodies of saints was the effect of divine intervention, all the phenomena attributed to vampires were purely natural or the fruit of imagination, terror, and fear. In other words, vampires did not exist. That's going to do it for part 1 of our 3-part series on vampire lore. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss part 2 coming soon. Stay tuned and stay weird.